it was an insane experience. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy to be the person that is given the job to replace Howard Stern, the king of all media. But I was given that job. I told this story on Howard Stern's show years later, because after Jon Stewart, I went to Matt and Trey. We went to Chris Rock, Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld, you name it. We tried to find the greatest replacement we ever could, because the first thing we said when Howard quit was O&A. We were told initially, no, you can't do it. We're not doing O&A. So we ended up with what I explained to Howard was the 78th choice for New York, a psychotic named David Lee Roth.
Welcome to Aircheck Season 5, a podcast about radio's personality from radio personalities. Listen as radio and TV's best on-air personalities, managers, owners, and consultants tell the tales of their storied careers with your hosts from Philadelphia, Rich DeSisto and Steve Raymond.
I'm Rich DeSisto.
And I'm Steve Raymond. If you're a media pro looking for a new job, you'll want to connect with headhunter Rob Barnett.
Rob Barnett's website, nextjobbestjob.com, is a curated subscription-based media job platform that complements his book of the same name. Both are designed to help you find and work from what he calls your North Star. It's all baked into Rob's compassionate and impressive unique headhunting service and career coaching practice for media professionals. But before Rob was helping many find their next career move, he was a major player in the media industry himself, and he knows a thing or two about getting let go.
On this Aircheck episode, Rob Barnett rewinds some of his remarkable radio and media moments, like freeform radio at Boston's WAAF in the early 1980s, that also included getting the Rolling Stones to play a secret listener concert.
It's not just clubs, but there's theatres. Theatres are nice to play, you know,
when he introduced Deep Cuts as the program director at KZEW, the Zoo in Dallas.
The Zoo, the best new music, more classic rock, deep cuts, more songs from more artists. 98 KZEW.
Rob also talks about his time as one of the heads of programming and production during the second phase of MTV and VH1. His reign as president of programming at CBS Radio when Howard Stern left for satellite radio, and so much more.
So Robert didn't know?
No. No one knew.
So this is my big
No one knows.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way, if you remember when Howard left for Sirius, you definitely remember David Lee Roth's radio run. And yes, Rob talks about that too.
And Rob, we've got a little surprise for you. We're going to have the late, great Don Pardo do the honors, as he did so gracefully during your days at WAAF.
And now the music maven on WAAF, Rob Barnett.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Hey, Rob, as a content strategist, I can't express enough to my students or clients the importance of becoming viral in your circle of influence. And as media pros, you, Steve, and I get that. We also get the notion that if people are talking about you, good, bad, or indifferent, you're still relevant, right? But it seems like more than not, we all need a little bit more than just relevancy to get noticed in the job market, regardless of the industry. And reduction in force has become a term of destruction for many of the extremely talented. And you've been aggressively circulating in your squad nonstop social media videos addressing with such a high level of compassion, I might add, the struggles that those of us deal with during the job hunt, a crusade that has allowed ghosting to be the norm. And as a guy who's also been on the beach, as we all have, without a job, talk about your mission and the growth of the videos that you share.
Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for the invite to come do this with you guys. I really do appreciate it. And let's start with that lovely phrase you used, on the beach. We as radio guys, we know what those three painful words mean. And it's hard when you lose any job. But when you lose a job in radio or television or film or video or stupid show business, it can be a really painful experience. The rug gets pulled out from under you. The phone calls that you thought you were going to get from all the people that you thought were going to call don't always come. And those first couple of days and weeks can be a very painful thing. So what happened to me about 7 or 8 years ago is just that. I was on the beach yet again in my long, crazy career, and I wasn't getting the responses that I wanted. So one day, in a fit of utter frustration, I just made a short, little, spontaneous, sad guy video, and I talked about it for a couple minutes. I threw it up on all the socials, and it got a lot of response. Thousands and thousands of people hit it.
I've got to start by saying thank you. I cannot believe how many people responded to the first video. We launched it just a couple of days ago, and by the time I put this one up, over 6,000 people saw this on Facebook and LinkedIn. And let's see, over 300 people commented. I talked about that new religion and the idea of just respond. And I think I've been able to respond directly to every single person that wrote. So thank you.
So I kept doing them without a game plan or a strategy. And then about 9-10 days into it, a guy calls me up and he goes, listen, I met you at MTV. I love the videos. I'm running a business. We need to hire a chief operating officer. Are you a headhunter? Is that what this is? And I went, yes. And that's how my whole life changed. I mean, in that exact accidental moment, I saw a new career chapter that I never would have imagined. And now 7 going on almost 8 years later, I'm in the helping people business. I'm trying to, work with as many companies as possible and as many job seekers as possible to just get people through all these closed doors and all these frustration points that happen on a job search.
So, Rob, I'm a huge Stones fan. Growing up in Connecticut, I became a huge Red Sox fan. September 1981. The Stones just released Tattoo You a few weeks earlier. Start Me Up, the lead track, was climbing the charts internationally, and you were part of one of the biggest radio promotions ever at Boston's WAAF. How did you pull off convincing the Rolling Stones to play a private warm-up gig for just the WAAF listeners? I mean, a coup, right? That didn't sit well with the competition, I got to believe.
Yeah, that was one of the most magical moments in my entire life. With a whole lot of luck and a whole lot of chutzpah, I find out that the Rolling Stones are going to be moving in to live at a farm secretly that's about 20 minutes from where I'm living, and working at WAAF in Worcester, Massachusetts. This is, as you said, back in 1981. So I became a junior detective, and I figured out that I was going to make it my life's mission to get to Mick and to get to the band. And I got a hot tip one day that he was going to be flying out from Massachusetts to Philadelphia to announce that 1981 Stones tour.
Nick, why are we here?
Because we're going to be here on the 25th in this stadium on the 25th of September, playing in this marvellous Philadelphia stadium, and then lots of other gigs after that, going through to December.
At that time, Worcester Airport was about the size of a postage stamp. And, back in the day, before the world got so dark and scary, there wasn't a lot of airport security. There were no metal detectors, none of that stuff. So I grabbed my news director at the time, this wonderful woman named Lana Jones. I said, get your tape recorder. We're going to go spend the day at the airport. And we hung out at that airport for hours and hours and hours, assuming the odds were pretty good that Mick was going to be there at some point in that day. And down from the sky comes a little 4-seat plane.
Wow. And
my heart starts pounding and pounding and pounding. I said, this might be the one. And the plane lands, and out comes a 500-foot tall security guard. Out comes Mick Jagger. Out comes this friend of mine who owned the recording studio where they were staying. And I walked up to him with a WAAF microphone, shaking like a leaf, and said, Mick, will you talk to us?
On the dates that are announced so far, that the only New England date that we have is the Hartford Civic Center. Are you planning on playing some Boston?
Yeah, there's lots
shows,
of other
but
gigs.
they're not down there yet?
They're not there. There's lots of other gigs. I mean, the tour lasts for 3 months or something.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not announcing all the gigs now. You know, we'll just do it as we go along.
Are you planning on hitting some of the clubs like you did on the last tour?
Yeah, there'll be.
And those will be unannounced.
It's not just clubs, but there's theatres. Theatres are nice to play. You know, I mean, clubs are good, but 300 people was very small. Do you know what I mean? Like in the community.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? 300 people was a theatre of 2,000
like
people. It's still like a relatively intimate and quite nice sound to play in.
And that began a little relationship that ended with me pitching Mick and the Stones a secret club gig just for 300 WAAF fans in a little club in the summer of 1981. It was an insane, lucky thing.
And this was early on in your radio career, right? I mean, in fact, you just interned at WBCN while attending college a few years earlier, and you also became a New England record promotional rep for CBS, Columbia, and Epic Records. A newly college graduate, and all this begins to happen to you. Your head must have been spinning. Talk about how your professional life was beginning to take shape with good old Mick.
Well, again, look, rock radio at the beginning of the 80s was not yet completely infected by all of the consultants. There were a whole lot of people playing what they wanted to play and saying what they wanted to say. And, FM rock radio was only born about 10 dozen years before that. So I was very, very lucky in my early days to be mentored by some of the people that created the damn thing. And these were people who had that freak flag flying all the time with that idea and that energy that you could do anything, that you could go create the weirdest stunts and promotions and, mess with the format. This is the kind of stuff now that you'd be fired for even thinking about if you were on a commercial radio station. But again, it's that L word, man. I was lucky to get in at a time when you could take those risks and not get shit canned for being crazy.
I remember a shoebox of cards for the songs that you pulled off the CDs or album racks in back of you. You had the card system right in front of you, and you moved that card to the back of the box. And
that's right.
Man, it's.
Yeah, I thought you were going to talk about carts because we had carts in addition to cards.
Carts too.
What we used to do at AAF in the early days, I was obsessed with the idea of drop-ins. So every night and every weekend, I'd go smoke a few, put in a 6-hour VHS blank cassette in the machine, and just start surfing television shows and movies, waiting for classic lines. I'd fill up a 6-hour VHS, walk in Monday morning, give it to my promotion guy and say, cart these up.
Hi, this is Suzanne Barnett, Rob's sister, on 107 WAAF Worcester. Crank it up!
And we were mixing music with pop culture so successfully that at one point I started trading these drop-ins with Rick Carroll, the program director of K-Rock in LA. And we were playing some of their drops and they were playing some of ours.
In Los Angeles, ideas are big business. For some, the stranger, the better. As a rule, new ideas don't stay new for very long here. They grow big, but sooner rather than later, they all disappear.
Oh boy, it sounds like fun.
Some ideas are completely illegal. That's when I go to work.
And you're listening to KROQ-FM Pasadena, the rock of the 80s.
It was free-form radio at its finest. We just had such a great time back then.
Many of our guests on Air Check recall their respective legacy stories during music radio's best days that you're talking about here. A moment when radio was the place for a musician to get discovered and for the fan to hear their favorite song. And at a time when radio played the role of social media, so much so that when tragedy struck, radio became an even larger companion. And there's so many of those moments to list. But 1980 was a year in pop culture, to say the least. In rock music specifically, Bon Scott of AC/DC and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin had both died. AC/DC decided to go on with the new singer, as we all know, Brian Johnson. And then Led Zeppelin announced on December 5th, 1980, to call it quits. And even if that wasn't difficult enough, 3 days later, John Lennon was murdered.
I'm Bill Vitka from The Source, and John Lennon is dead at the age of 40, the apparent victim of what New York City police call a screwball with a gun. Lennon was on his way back from New York.
Your first ever radio show was on WAAF the night before John's death. Talk about the converse of emotions that you must have felt. Your first radio show and then getting punched in the gut the next day with that tragic news.
Well, it was a horrible thing for all of us that are alive in 1980. That was, for some people, the Kennedy assassination, I'm old enough that was one of my first memories. But obviously, when that happened, the world stopped and we all felt the pain that we've never stopped feeling for John. So, my first paying gig was the night before. I got an overnight shift. And because of that, I was still living in Boston at the time. I drove back, and you know what it's like when you haven't slept for a couple of days. I went to sleep on that night, December 8th, early in the evening, had a couple of roommates, and they came in when the news broke. I remember it like it was yesterday, and they woke me up from this deep, deep sleep in my bed and told me that news. And then, the next couple of days were kind of a blur. I got to meet Bruce Springsteen for the first time ever a couple of nights after John was murdered. And I went backstage, and John did an interview. John and Yoko did an interview the afternoon that he was murdered. It was a 3-hour interview. And back then, you'll remember this, we used to get those radio specials on vinyl. That's how they were distributed to us. So the day that I was getting ready to go see Bruce, I was given this last ever interview of John Lennon. And in that interview, which many people have heard, John said that he had the guitar up on the wall for 5 years. He wasn't playing music. And when they got ready to make Double Fantasy, he sent their assistant out to go buy him all the latest records that were out there so they could understand what kind of dynamic they were re-entering. And John mentions Hungry Heart in that last ever interview as something that really spoke to him and touched on the idea that they were using when they created Just Like Starting Over. There was that homage to that kind of 50s sound. And so I'm back there in a little teeny semicircle with John Landau and Bruce. I'm 20 years old, and I had this idea that maybe Bruce doesn't know this, right? Because as you said, a world before social media is a different world. And I told him what John had said, and he put his arms out and touched me on the shoulder and just said, thank you. It was insanely painful and powerful, but I just knew that there's a chance he did not know that happened in the last hours of John's life.
You talk about that song. If I remember correctly, he offered that to the Ramones, Bruce.
That's right.
So I wonder if the Ramones ended up recording it, if it would have changed the way time moved, because would it have sounded the same? Would it have the same 50s melody to it that inspired John with Starting Over? So interesting. Wow.
Yeah, well, the story that John Landau's told several times is that he stopped Bruce from giving it to the Ramones because John heard what it was, which was Bruce's first #1 hit song.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
While you're kicking ass as the program director at WAAF in Boston, something happened in the music industry that was a cosmic shift in how it was not only delivered, but consumed. as MTV was launched in August of 1981. Now, you would eventually end up at MTV and VH1, but as a radio programmer at WAAF, how did you respond to this new type of competitor or distraction? The video presentation of not just the rock artists you were playing on WAAF, but of course many other genres. So what was your initial reaction?
We all knew when they launched that was something that was going to change things. But we also were purists, right? We were FM rock radio purists who believed that we had a special connection to the music, to the artists, and to the audience that meant that the pictures were supposed to be in your mind. So like Springsteen and many others, I think my initial reaction to it wasn't the one that I had when I ended up working there about 8 years later. You know, I wasn't there at the beginning of MTV. I was there kind of almost still in the early years, but kind of phase two, you know. But you can all remember what it was like when people, you know, now they binge series on Netflix and Amazon. People used to binge the shit out of MTV. They'd sit there.
I'm one of them.
Yeah,
I hold my college roommate's record for 8 straight hours.
Wow.
There you go.
Downstairs, seriously, just watching. 8 straight. Because I was a college kid. I didn't have job. I worked in part-time radio on the weekends. I think it was 9 hours. But anyway. So yeah, 8 years later, 1989, as MTV had become this music video powerhouse, you get a call. Talk about how you eventually ended up as one of the heads of programming and production for MTV and VH1.
Well, we started this conversation with those 3 words that too many of us experience all the time called on the beach. So in, let's see, what year? 1987, I'm literally on the beach, living in Los Angeles, penniless, trying to figure out what I was doing. I had an idea for a television show. There used to be a piece of my resume from 87 to 89. I used to write idiot with an idea for a television show. That was actually on my resume. And I'm sitting there in a little studio apartment in LA, really hurting. The phone rings. It's a person I used to work with in radio because, you know, MTV in its early days were made up of a lot of former radio execs. So I got the call in 1989 to move back to New York, first as what was called manager of music programming. What that meant was that every single Monday morning, there were a total of 6 human beings that would sit in a room. They'd play for us every single music video submitted by every single record label and band. And we'd sit there like an old episode of the Christians to the Lions and either give the thumbs up or the thumbs down on hours and hours and hours of music videos. Once we selected the ones we wanted, I used to have about 4 or 5 people working for me, and we would have a 24-hour log on paper that would be passed from one person to the next, making it better and better and better and better till it ended up on my desk, where I used to then wear a pager. And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I was responsible for every minute of everything that was seen on MTV. So wow. It was an insane job. I would get a call at, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the network operations center would say, hey, we're 75 seconds light for the 4 a.m. hour. What do you want to do? That was my first job there. But I stayed in that company for almost a dozen years. I had a lot of different jobs. For some of those years, I was one of the heads of programming at MTV and VH1. For other years, I was one of the heads of production for both of those networks. I made about a dozen of the rockumentaries with Kurt Loder. That was an amazing experience. And then at VH1, I oversaw the series and specials department for many years.
Behind the music?
Yeah, I don't have any credit for making that show or creating that show, but I was there when we launched that show. And that was a game changer, obviously. We ended up making hundreds and hundreds of episodes of that. So MTV and VH1 was an amazing place to work when it was still all about music. The minute it started to shift to reality shows, that's where a lot of us fell out of love, and it wasn't the monster that we all loved it to be in the music days.
So by 1992, huge year for MTV. The network reached $400 million in revenue and was in 112 million homes. I think that was the year. Was also the birth of something new in the MTV world, a show called The Real World.
This is the true story. True story.
7 strangers picked to live in a loft
and have their lives taped.
To find out what happens.
What? When people stop being polite. Could you get the phone?
And start getting real.
The Real World.
A reality show, the first of its kind, that helped pave the way for many offsprings. And I think you just answered that question. That's kind of when it got away from the music videos, it kind of took that shift. And I think it took that shift away from the original audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were a lot of smart business rationalizations about the need to do that. It was based on Nielsen ratings, right? If you were watching a 3.5-minute music video that you loved and it was followed by one that you didn't, you're gone, and there goes that quarter hour of ratings. So, the bosses realized that they needed to change format, and as you say, little by little, and that's just about when it happened, the reality shows started to come in and the amount of music hours started to go down.
And talk about the challenge you took on in 1994 as your role in reinventing MTV's sister video channel, VH1. Talk about those pivots that were made and perhaps some of the strategies discussed that maybe were never implemented.
Well, look, when you relaunch any kind of a brand, as you say, there are a lot of ideas that go up on walls and brainstorming meetings, and some work and some don't. In the first couple of years when I moved over to VH1, we didn't have a lot of original ideas. So the one original idea we had was to go get all the original music on television. We bought the rights to Don Kirshner's rock concert, to the Midnight Special, to American Bandstand, all of them, right? The music interviews that guys like Dick Cavett and Mike Douglas used to do when John and Yoko hosted for an entire week on the Mike Douglas show. So for a couple of years, we were doing all of that. But then, as we mentioned a couple of minutes ago in this chat, people walk in one day and said, "Hey, remember those Milli Vanilli guys?" And we said, "Yeah." And they said, I don't think they've ever really told the story of how they fooled the music world and lip synced their way to a Grammy. Why don't we go interview them? And the boss said, yes, they went. And that was the first episode of Behind the Music.
In 1989, Milli Vanilli were riding high.
Everything was happening so fast. We were enjoying it.
But when their lie was exposed,
it was the worst day of my life.
Everything fell apart.
I knew that day would come.
Now they tell their side of the story for the first time on VH1's Behind the Music.
Don't blame us.
Like anything in show business, when you have a hit that blows the doors off the ratings, it takes about 26 seconds to look at each other and say, okay, we got one. And then we made, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes of that. So at that moment, the producers gave us the new idea for VH1 in the mid to late 90s, which was, let's do the stories about the music. And that became a brand that birthed a whole lot of great hit shows. Not just that one. Pop-up video legends, storytellers.
Welcome to VH1 Storytellers.
We used to do a show called Where Are They Now? And Before They Were Rock Stars.
Before They Were Rock Stars, the show that proves everybody who's somebody used to be nobody.
It was really, really fun there in the 90s. We had a great run.
And things seem to, pardon the pun, blast off ever since college at Boston University. But who was Rob Barnett before Boston? Where are you originally from? Talk about your childhood and your influences. And did you end up in an industry that you thought you would, or was there other plans maybe from mom and dad that wanted you to go in a different direction?
Well, no, I was always obsessed with music in every form, with pop culture in every form, ever since I was a little kid. My mom and dad took me to my first concert when I was 7 years old. That year, here it comes, was 1967, when I saw Jimi Hendrix open for the Monkees.
The Jimi Hendrix Experience, and they've joined the Monkees concert tour of the U.S. They weren't in there in the very beginning. It's just over the past couple of days now. And Keener brings you the Monkees in Detroit. On July the 29th, the Jimi Hendrix Experience will be with the Monkees. Jimmy's 22 years old. And
that was my first show. Jimmy did 4 shows for the Monkees before the producers realized that was a really bad double bill. But that was my first show. So I feel like I was, strangely indoctrinated into rock and roll at like a very, very young age. And then my dad worked in the advertising industry. He was kind of like a Don Draper guy. That's who he was. He was a madman. And he had a lot of connections to industry people. So I told you the 7-year-old boy story. When I was 8 years old, my dad brought me into the radio studio of Cousin Brucey at WABC in New York.
Here I am, girls. Hi, everybody. Cousin Brucey, another fantastic, magical, musical hour. WABC, power, hit 3. I can do that again if I try.
I met him when I was 11 years old. My dad brought me into WNEW. I met Scott Muni.
Coming November 18th and 19th, Traffic, Cat Stevens, Hammer, and Joe's Lights, all at the Fillmore East. Scott Muni here. WNEW-FM.
So little by little, I think it was just this kind of destiny that, I was going to end up being as close to the music as I possibly could. And in the radio business, as the first of my, 100 different jobs in showbiz, it was definitely radio first.
Were you listening to WNEW as a kid? Were you inspired by that signal and those personalities?
That was my station, yep. As a New York and New Jersey kid, that was my station. I loved those disc jockeys. As a matter of fact, my hero, Vin Scelsa, was my favorite disc jockey on WNEW-FM.
My name is Vin Scelsa. Some of you may be familiar with my work, New York radio. I've only lately started to do some things here on WNEW-FM.
So much of the music on that wall is there because he turned me on to it. And I love that radio station. They meant so much to me.
You and Howard Stern both attended Boston University. And while you were meeting Scott Muni in 1971, as you just referenced, Howard was playing DJ and campus radio at the campus radio station WTBU, where you eventually became a DJ and the station's music director a bunch of years later. And not the last Howard Stern chapter in your story. In fact, 2004, you joined the executive team at CBS Infinity Broadcasting in New York. And then the shot nobody saw coming, Howard announced that he was leaving for Sirius Satellite Radio. Oh my God. You didn't have to be in radio to understand the gravity of that news. Talk about what was going on behind the scenes at Infinity Broadcasting on October 6, 2004.
Well, as you say, it's a wild karmic boomerang in my strange little life, right? Because as a young boy, I'm on that same microphone he was on at the same college radio station at Boston University.
My name is Howard Stern on the Howard Stern Experience, and if you love music, you'll love Deep Purple on TBU.
And then many lifetimes later, I end up the president of CBS Radio on the morning that he quits.
Well, Sirius sat me down and they said, look, you're everything to this business. You're the one who can change it. Mm-hmm. You're the one who can bring people and say, and by the way, they have the NFL and all that stuff, and that's great. But the fact of the matter is, in order for it to become a real business,
It has to have something that belongs to it and not everybody else.
Now, I mean, I haven't even told my parents this news yet. I was tempted to tell them, but they told me that you can't because it could affect the stock price.
It was an insane experience. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy to be the person that is given the job to replace Howard Stern, the king of all media. But I was given that job. The first idea that I had was to go to my old friend Jon Stewart. He was already at that point hosting The Daily Show, but I had a different idea. My idea was to hire Jon as kind of a Lorne Michaels and see if he could help me produce a radio show that might end up back then starring a guy not a lot of people had heard of named Stephen Colbert. I went to meet with Jon and his manager, but I was also meeting with Joel Hollander, my CEO at the time. I had set the table for this big sit down, like a mafia sit down. And I make the pitch that Jon knew was coming, which was an executive producer pitch. Joel says, no. Forget that. You got to host the radio show. How much? Joel tried to close him. And Jon is kicking me under the table going, what is this? I'm not hosting a morning radio show. So when that melted down, I've told this story many times. I told this story on Howard Stern's show years later. Howard had me on to tell this long tale because after Jon Stewart, I went to Matt and Trey. We went to Chris Rock, Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld, you name it. We tried to find the greatest replacement we ever could because the first thing we said when Howard quit was O&A.
It's the Opie and Anthony Show.
Opie and Anthony.
Radio shock jocks.
Opie and Anthony.
That was the first idea.
Okay.
But we were told initially, no, you can't do it. We're not doing O&A. So I didn't just work for Joel. We worked for this monster named Les Moonves, the head of CBS. And we knew that he wasn't going to take just anybody to go in that show. We knew we needed star power. So we went to all these people. Finally, Jon Stewart said to me one day, hire Carolla. And I said, not without Kimmel. So he said, all right, so figure it out. Get Jimmy. So that became one of the most important relationships to this day in my life, where I hired Jimmy as my consigliere and producer, and we hired his old friend Adam and gave them the entire West Coast of what Howard had. Howard, of course, was on so many infinity about to be CBS radio stations at the time. And even though Jimmy was on the air every night doing his show, he had just started Jimmy Kimmel Live. Jimmy was up at the crack of dawn with me every morning, trying to help birth the Adam Carolla show. We hired about 15 people to support Adam. And, Howard will tell you to this day that show did really well. But then this will be the saddest part of our podcast. Of course, we ended up with what I explained to Howard was the 78th choice for New York, a psychotic named David Lee Roth. Initially, fooled a lot of us, about 7 of the most powerful people in Infinity Broadcasting, into thinking that he was going to do a good job. But you know how that story ends. It was a disastrous flame out. I got fired. And guess what? They went back to idea number 1 and hired Opie and Anthony.
So for anyone else, that moment would have been a proverbial nail in the coffin. Howard announcing he's leaving. But not for Rob Barnett. Nope. You then end up raising millions of dollars to create and start one of the first original online video studios and networks, the My Damn Channel Network.
Hello, Internet darlings. We are here to talk about the My Damn Channel Comedy Network.
Now, as all of us know, there's literally loads of hilarious comedy on the interwebs, and we'd love for it and you to be a part of the My Damn Channel family.
I mean, come on, we aren't the only people making silly videos.
No, and of course,
Now, this is before the Netflix and Amazon original series networks as we know it today, right? I mean, it had a pretty good run. Talk about the initiative and what shows were produced on My Damn Channel.
Well, as I said, I got thrown out with the trash by Moonves in 2000. summer of 2006. At that moment, YouTube is still a baby. YouTube had only launched in 2005. So just like earlier in this conversation, we talked through what it meant when something like MTV launched to change the world. The minute YouTube launched, I realized that was the next major change in the world of media as we know it. Remember what it was like to try to send somebody a 3-minute video in the days of dial-up, right? It could take a half hour to hear. And then maybe you'd see the video. But the minute that YouTube removed the concept that used to be known as buffering, and you could see the highest quality video 1 second after the finger pressed the button, I knew that was going to change the world like most of us did. The videos that were on YouTube in its infancy were dogs, cats, and babies doing funny things. So I took a look at that and thought, well, wait a minute. What if we got A-list talent from film and television, from music, from comedy, and instead of doing 60-minute shows and 30-minute shows, we got A-list talent to do 3-minute shows. It was a pretty simple idea. I'm not the only one who thought of it. I was one of hundreds who had this idea, but that told me that it was time not to go get another job, but to create a job. And in order to do that, I had to go out and raise money. That was quite an education for this college dropout. I went to a Barnes and Noble. I bought the book called Business Plans for Dummies or something like that. Remember those black and yellow books?
Oh, yeah.
And I just started creating the idea for a television network of the future. As you said, we were about maybe 5, 6, 7 years before Netflix and Amazon started streaming original series. So I used to go to pitch meetings with people, and it would take 15, 20 minutes to explain what an online original video series were. It was a little bit, ahead of its time. But we launched My Damn Channel and were able to run a business for 10 long years.
With love and respect to the sisters and brothers who helped me this morning, July 31st, 2007, we launched My Damn Channel, a band of sisters and brothers who believed that we had an inkling about the future of television, a future without gatekeepers, a future with fans and artists in direct unity, without notes.
We employed hundreds of people with offices in New York and LA. We had hundreds and hundreds of stars from music and film and television and comedy all working for us. And we were also doing something that also took about a half hour to explain at the time. We weren't just running, these annoying little ads on the videos. We were selling advertisers and ad agencies on this hard to understand concept called branded content, where the brands would get inside the actual shows that we were doing in funny and unusual ways so that we could sell that relationship at a premium price and really, make the kind of money that we needed to employ all those people, to hire all that talent and run a successful business. It was an incredible experience. I'm so lucky to have worked with people that really believed in us early on and knew that we were, on to something. There were probably about, 50, 100 companies like us in those early days of YouTube that knew that we would now, about 20 years later, get to a point where television ratings would go down and down and down and down and be replaced in our attention spans with all this online viewing.
Yeah. So there you are again. It's 2017 and you find yourself looking for another opportunity. Now, although brief, how did your position at Amazon's Audible come about? Was there a connection to how they were a part of the end of My Damn Channel?
Well, My Damn Channel, like any good startup, was always hoping for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow called an acquisition, right? Was there a bigger media mommy and daddy that wanted to buy our little rebel ship? And the answer is almost, not once, not twice, but almost 4 times. We were going to make the big crazy money and be bought by a bigger entity. But after the 4th time, I took my toys and went home. And then I started sending out resumes, trying to look for a job. The quick answer to how I got the job at Audible is a beautiful one, because it's like the way most of us get jobs. A friend of mine called me up. He knew about it. They were talking to him about it, a great guy that I knew from my television life called Kent Reese. And he was interviewed and said, I told him I don't think I'm the guy for this, but you are. And it was a beautiful gift that he gave me. They called, and now I'm, working at this audio book inventor and innovator and leader, part of Amazon, and they gave me a project. The project was quite something. The year is, as you said, 2017, and they put me in charge of a man that was out of work in 2017, a man who had just written a book to honor his late son, and that man was Joe Biden.
Audible Original Publishing presents Promise Me, Dad, A Year of Hope, Hardship, and Purpose. Written and performed by Joe Biden.
The then former vice president. They gave me the project because earlier in my career, I had a lot of experience working in documentary and working in presidential politics with the Clintons, with John Kerry, with a lot of other leaders of this free world. So I got to meet Joe Biden and work one-on-one with him for about 4 months when he didn't think he was ever going to be back in elected office ever again. One of the kindest, nicest, brilliant men I've ever met. And it was a fantastic experience to get to support him and be with him. When we launched that project, 3 days later, I was called down to human resources, and I thought, here it comes, my bonus, my raise, my promotion. And instead I got that other meeting, that other human resource meeting where they say things like, what we're about to say is not personal, it's just business. Your department's been restructured, your job's been eliminated. Bye-bye in the car. And so that job lasted about 12 or 13 months. But I did get a nice big bag of Amazon stock, which is very, very important to me and my family. And in all seriousness, I had a good experience and way too short-lived. That's what accidentally led to Headhunter Boy, when I realized how hard it is to be out of work, how many resumes you can send out and hear back nothing but crickets. And that evolved into what is now clearly the final chapter in my long, long, long showbiz run.
I wanted to spend 5 minutes to see what it would feel like to help each other navigate a few ideas. Idea 1, the mass insanity that is media in 2018. And idea 2, where all of us who've worked in media for decades fit in this chaotic environment. Is it another full-time job? Are we going to sit inside?
And it's nextjobbestjob.com, which also spawned a book. Talk a little bit about the similarities and what's the difference between the website and the book?
Well, as we said, I started this journey by making little short daily videos every single morning. I never missed one for about the first 5.5 years, talking with people about their job search, trying to give people as much help as I possibly could each day in these little snippets. So one day I get an email from a man that looks to be a pretty credible literary agent. And I look up to my mom in heaven, who always had this little wish that her baby boy would someday write a book.
Wow.
And I called this amazing, wonderful man with a great agent name, by the way. His name is Rick Richter. And I called Mr. Richter and I said, how can I be of service? And he had been watching these daily videos. And he said, this is a book. And I said something, I tried not to be disrespectful, but I said something like, this is a book if you sell it and pay me to write this book. Yeah, I was trying to be funny. And this amazing man really did change my life, because in those early years of COVID, I was paid a nice amount of money, a nice book advance for a great publisher to go write what became Next Job, Best Job. It's called A Headhunter's 11 Strategies to Get Hired Now.
It's here. I was warned that the book publishing business takes a little longer than some of the other media that we all love to do. But yesterday, I did it. Signature. I've got a contract signed. Not a big fan of the talking to dead people on social media, but I'm going to break that rule for just a second. Mom, if you're listening, I did it. It took a while, but your boy is an author.
So the book comes out with 11 different chapters to help people through how to overhaul the resume, how to do the LinkedIn, how to do the damn job interviews. It's a very practical book, but of course, because of my rock and roll background, I sneak in little advice from people like Bob Dylan and Keith Richards and George Harrison and some of these amazing people that I've got to meet and work with throughout my life.
Kind of the way you incorporate song to the videos, using that as part of your message. So yeah, very brilliantly done.
That's right. Once a DJ, always a
that's
DJ.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So that's right. Every video starts with a song. So the book comes out and does really well. And I do what we call sessions with job seekers every day of the week. These are one-on-one sessions for people who need a lot more help to get their job search going. And the sessions kind of mirror what's in the book. So we always had the idea that that book might become a website, but we realized in years of working with thousands of job seekers that most people have a lot of the same problems. They don't trust what's on LinkedIn or Indeed or ZipRecruiter or a lot of these other sites that have these job postings that have been up there for months and months and months and months, and you don't know if it's still open or not. Or they'll post a job on a Monday, you open it Tuesday, and it says no longer accepting applications. They've already taken it down. I could go on, but I can see by your head shake that you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
There are hundreds of these problems. So in 2025, I woke up one day and decided that I would spend a large chunk of my retirement money in my savings account and see if I couldn't go fix this problem specifically for media people. So we launched nextjobbestjob.com in the summer of 2025. We're on the launch pad. We're just days away from going live Friday, August 1st. 2025, Next Job, Best Job will be here to help you. To give media people we've built something a constant daily flow of the brand new best jobs in radio, television, film, video, magazines, you name it, anything that needs a media person to go create content or to sell it or promote it or be the researcher or be the lawyer, you name it, we do it. And we built all this technology that's pulling in the latest jobs every single day. But because I don't even trust my own technology, every single morning we go in there with the team. I have an amazing person named Victoria who works with me, and we hand select the brand new jobs. Sometimes we'll upload as many as 100 a day. and we're charging just $1 a day for 90 days to give people something that will save hours and hours and hours of time having a look at all these other goddamn websites.
Yeah, it seems now more than ever to be a full-time job looking for a job, the AI, the algorithms. But your videos, the book, and nextjobbestjob.com are welcome resources to keep the focus, to fix your misalignment, and to be in a better position.
Well, it's what I do every day, right? I work with people, sometimes 7, 8, 9 meetings a day, one-on-one, walking them through as many of the practical steps as possible. The one thing I can tell you is that most people now are using AI and ChatGPT to write their resumes and their LinkedIns. Don't do it. Don't do it. It turns everybody into the same boring robotic statements of, I take every project from inception to completion on budget and on time. I'm an award-winning, experienced professional with 20 years. They all say the same stuff. So we're trying to get people to do the one thing you need to do the most on a job search, which is stand out, be unique, be yourself, be original. And so these are the minutes and hours of every one of my work days. And we have 2 websites that help people, right? Nextjobbestjob.com is where people get all the job listings from us. And then the stupidly named robbarnettmedia.com is where I offer all this other help in what we call sessions.
That's a clever name, Rob. Don't kid yourself.
It was so hard to come up with.
I was going to say.
So, on the resume side of things, I always thought you kind of had to create your resume that way because of the way it goes through, the keyword search through the algorithm of the company that might be using it to sort out the best qualified candidate. That's not always the case?
Rich, this is exactly correct. If you want to be stuck in the black hole of the universe, also known as human resources. So if you write it with the algorithms and the AI and the words and the things and you're customizing, you're using all this technology, and then you're just pressing the apply button 100 times a day going, honey, trust me, I'm going to get a job any minute now. I applied to 100 of these. They're all going through AI. They're all going through robots, and they're all going to human resources, which means that you're still weeks and weeks away from the only person that really decides, the boss. So we're writing these documents to try and get them seen by the decision makers at these companies. And then we also offer people a service where I become the guy that chases the executives at that company to get to the boss and say, do me a favor. Meet Rich, give him 30 minutes, meet Steve, give him a meeting, right? Because the algorithms are just that sort of old method of job search. You can't rely on it. If you go ask 20 people right now, how'd you get your most recent job? Most people will tell you that someone they know made an introduction.
So true. So true. What are you finding? What are you learning as you're talking to clients, for lack of a better word, that are paying for your service? What are some of the things that you're seeing as a common thread? Perhaps maybe what we just talked about of playing to the algorithm with a resume build. But what are some of the other things that you're seeing that could lend maybe a little piece of value to those listening that are looking for a job that perhaps maybe it might be enough for them to contact you and to hire you?
There is one key mistake that I always made, and it's the same key mistake that I see most people making. On LinkedIn, under your photo and your name, there's that really important piece of real estate where you've got to tell us, headhunters, recruiters, and hiring execs, who you are. Right under your photo, right under your name. What a lot of people do in that piece of real estate is they put a whole bunch of words. They say writer, producer, podcaster, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, circus clown, all this kind of stuff. in my own history, I was radio, I was television, I was film, I was online video, I was audiobooks, I was an author. That doesn't make me very hireable to a company that's just looking for one of those things. So this is a concept that I work with people on every single day called the North Star. My North Star is headhunter. That's it. And it wasn't until I came up with that one descriptor of who I am professionally that even my best friends knew how to help me find work, right? Now, we've just talked about LinkedIn. Let's talk about the resume. What does everybody have under their name on the top of their resume? They've got their phone number. They've got their email address. Some people are still putting their street address, which is seemingly weird. Why do you need to do that? And what I've also seen, Rich, is that almost nobody puts their North Star. If I needed a resume today, the second most important thing other than my name should say headhunter. So we're working with people every day of the week to try to figure out what is that one main career functional title that defines the job you really want, that's backed up in the evidence on your resume and your LinkedIn that you are that guy. And once you make that one decision, it really helps focus the job search in a way that is a lot more effective than what I'm calling the butcher, baker, candlestick maker. The bakery does not care about two of those things. They only want one of them.
Well, we're certainly going to put the link to Next Job, Best Job, your book. So if anybody listening wants to purchase the book, and obviously nextjobbestjob.com, what's the best way somebody can reach out to you, Rob, if they're interested in talking to more about what you have to provide?
I think I'm one of the last 5 people on this earth that immediately responds to emails. So mine is rob@robbarnettmedia.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Put it in the link. Nobody likes being ghosted. I like it so little that I try to respond to everybody that reaches out to be helpful.
And one last thing about what you have to offer without giving away too much. I did see a recent video where you listed, I think, 6 or 7 things, a checklist of what you should go through before you either attempt to apply for a job or the interview for that matter. If there was one piece of advice you can give to those of us that are on the beach that have put an entire career, decades of work into an industry that is no longer return on that investment, what could you offer to somebody who's really in a bind thinking that, what am I going to do next with all the skill sets that they acquired through decades of working in the radio industry that no longer is looking at them as valuable?
Well, it's an important question. It's one that comes up every single day for me and my team. And, you've got to learn how to represent the past. Okay. My mother raised me to never tell a lie, so I don't. But when I work with people who are trying to find their next job, we take a whole lot of time to go through that whole career from the first paycheck to the last and think about ways to write and rewrite everything that you've ever done that sells and tells a story that makes you as hireable as possible. So thing one is you got to get those damn documents to start singing a much better tune. Thing two is you got to find the help that you need to get the introductions to the people at these companies. And then thing three is that dreaded 30-minute interview that seems to be the only amount of time anybody ever gets in that first chance to try to get the second most important thing, the second interview. Mm-hmm. So I work with people to actually do full dress rehearsals on those interviews because, I'm one of the most long-winded guys you'll ever meet. It's deadly in a job interview. You got to rehearse and practice and figure out how to give really short answers because that 30 minutes is like a basketball game where the only way to score as many points as possible is to keep the damn answers short. I used to be, ask this first question, say, well, let me tell you about me and the Stones. And then it's 10 minutes later 1/3 of the interview is gone, right? So all these things, Rich, are really like little practical ways to take the job search and break it down into its component parts.
Awesome.
Rob, this has been quite a journey. Each story from those of us in the radio business who have had the privilege to encounter these remarkable historic events and moments is special. And those who get to listen and live vicariously through the stories themselves are lucky to have these stories told right here on AirCheck Podcast, man. Thank you. Thank you for including yours. It's amazing. Wow.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this. I've been listening to a lot of old radio friends on your series, and I really appreciate that you're doing it.
Thanks, Rob.
You can follow us, stream, and download every episode of AirCheck on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give us a great rating and share the show with a friend. You can also listen and subscribe on YouTube. Leave a comment, too. We'd love to hear what your favorite episode of AirCheck is.
This is Rich DeSisto.
And I'm Steve Raymond.
We'll talk to you soon.
Closing out another episode of AirCheck, a podcast about radio's personality from radio personalities. If you have radio stories to share, we'd love to hear from you. Join the AirCheck guest list. Email aircheckme@gmail.com. Musical props are Chris Gordon's. Announcer props, I'll take those. Greg O'Brien, the OB. AirCheck is the creation of RDPK Productions.